I was 33 years old when my father asked me a question that permanently changed the way I saw him. Not yelled, not demanded at first. Asked. We were sitting around my parents' dining table on a Sunday afternoon. My daughter Emma was 11 then, happily showing her grandfather a certificate she'd earned at school. She was beaming with pride. I remember smiling as I watched her. Then Dad cleared his throat. "There's something we need to discuss as a family." The room went quiet. My younger brother Ryan looked down at the table. His wife suddenly became very interested in her coffee mug. That's when I knew something was coming. Dad folded his hands together. Tyler got accepted to Yale. Everyone immediately started congratulating my nephew. And honestly, I was happy for him. Getting into Yale was a huge accomplishment. But then Dad continued, "The problem is tuition." The atmosphere shifted instantly. Ryan sighed heavily. "We're short," he admitted. "Way short." I nodded sympathetically. College was expensive. But what happened next never crossed my mind. Dad looked directly at me, then at Emma, then back at me. "Your daughter's college fund could solve this." For a second, I genuinely thought he was joking. I laughed. Nobody else did. My smile disappeared. "What?" Dad leaned forward. "Emma is only 11. Tyler needs the money now. Yale won't wait." I stared at him. The college fund he was talking about wasn't some random savings account. It was Emma's future. $47,000. Every birthday check, every tax refund, every overtime shift I'd worked, every sacrifice I'd made after my divorce. Years of planning, years of saying no to vacations, years of putting my daughter's future ahead of my own comfort. And my father was looking at it like it was a spare piggy bank. I felt my stomach tighten. "You're serious?" "Absolutely," Dad said. Ryan stayed silent. "That hurt almost as much." Dad continued, "Emma can rebuild her fund later. Tyler has a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." I looked at my daughter. She was too young to fully understand the conversation, but she understood enough. Her smile was gone. Her eyes were fixed on me, waiting, listening, trusting me. I felt something inside me crack, not because of the money, because of what Dad was really saying. He wasn't asking me to help family. He was telling me that my daughter's dreams mattered less than my nephew's. And the worst part? The conversation was only getting started, because what my father said next revealed something he'd been hiding for years, and once I heard it, there was no going back. The moment Dad finished speaking, the room felt suffocating. I looked around the table, hoping someone would say this was insane. Nobody did. Not my mother. Not Ryan. Not even Ryan's wife. The silence felt like betrayal all by itself. Finally, I forced out a laugh. "You're not actually asking me to give away Emma's college fund?" Dad frowned as if I were being difficult. "I'm asking you to think about the bigger picture." "The bigger picture?" I repeated. "Tyler earned his place at Yale. Opportunities like this don't come around often." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Neither does a child's future." Dad shook his head. "Emma has years before college." There it was again, as if her dreams were somehow less important because they weren't immediate. I looked at Ryan. "Are you seriously okay with this?" My brother shifted uncomfortably. "We've exhausted every option." "No," I said firmly. "You've exhausted every option except taking responsibility." The temperature in the room instantly dropped. Ryan's face darkened. Dad slammed his hand against the table. "Don't speak to your brother like that." I stared at him. The same father who had taught me to work hard, the same father who used to tell me nobody owed me anything. Now he wanted my daughter to pay for someone else's problem. The hypocrisy was unbelievable. Mom finally spoke. "It would only be temporary." I almost laughed. Temporary? College funds don't magically grow back. The money had taken years to save. Years! I turned toward Emma. She was sitting quietly, trying to disappear. My heart shattered. Children notice more than adults realize. She could hear every word. She knew people were discussing taking something that belonged to her, and nobody except me seemed bothered by it. Emma, I said softly, why don't you go watch TV for a little while? She nodded and left the room. The second she was gone, I lost all patience. No. One word. Clear. Simple. Final. Dad leaned back in his chair. You're really going to deny your nephew a future? I blinked. The manipulation was so obvious that it almost impressed me. No, I replied. I'm protecting my daughter's future. You're being selfish. That one hit me harder than it should have. Selfish. I was a single mother. After my divorce, I'd worked 2 jobs for almost 3 years. I missed holidays, skipped new clothes, drove a car that sounded like it might explode every time I started it. Also, Emma would never have to struggle the way I had. And somehow I was selfish? I looked directly at Dad. When Tyler was born, did you start a college fund for him? Silence. I already knew the answer. No. When he was 10? Nothing. When he was 15? Ryan looked away. Dad's jaw tightened. There had never been a fund. No planning. No savings. No sacrifices. Just an expectation that someone else would eventually fix the problem. And apparently that someone was supposed to be me. Dad pointed toward the hallway where Emma had disappeared. Family helps family. I nodded slowly. You're right. For a second, I thought he believed he was winning. Then I continued. So, where was this family support when Emma and I were struggling after my divorce? Nobody answered. 'Cause they all remembered. Ryan had borrowed money and never paid it back. Dad had told me I needed to be independent. Mom had said hardship built character. Funny how those lessons only applied to me. Dad's face turned red. That's different. No, I said quietly. It's exactly the same. The room exploded into arguments. Voices overlapped. Accusations flew. Ryan claimed I was jealous of Tyler's success. Mom said I was tearing the family apart. Dad called me stubborn, but through all of it, I noticed something. Nobody once talked about Emma. Not really. Nobody asked what losing that money would mean for her. Nobody cared. And in that moment, a painful truth became impossible to ignore. My daughter wasn't family to them in the same way Tyler was. She never had been. The golden child wasn't Ryan. It was Ryan's son. Everything revolved around him. Everything always had. That realization hurt more than the demand itself. I left my parents' house that afternoon with Emma holding my hand. Neither of us spoke during the drive home. Then, halfway there, she quietly asked a question I'll never forget. Mun, Grandpa thinks Tyler matters more than me, doesn't he? My hands tightened around the steering wheel. I wanted to tell her she was wrong. I wanted to protect her from the truth. But before I could answer, my phone started ringing. It was my father. And the voicemail he left that night would start a chain of events none of us could have imagined. I didn't answer my father's call that night. Honestly, I was too angry, too hurt, too disappointed. After I tucked Emma into bed, I sat alone on my couch staring at my phone, while his voicemail notification blinked on the screen. Finally, around midnight, I pressed play. His voice filled the room, and somehow it was worse than I expected. Melissa, you're making an emotional decision. Think carefully before you destroy Tyler's future. Family won't forget this. That was it. No concern for Emma, no apology, no acknowledgement that he'd ask me to hand over $47,000. Just a warning. Family won't forget this. I listened to it 3 times. Each time, my anger grew. By the third replay, something inside me had changed. I stopped trying to convince myself this was a misunderstanding. It wasn't. Dad meant every word. The next morning, one transferred Emma's college fund into a separate account that nobody in my family knew existed. I also updated every security setting and beneficiary record. If anyone thought they could pressure me into changing my mind later, they were mistaken. I was done discussing it. Unfortunately, my family wasn't. Over the following weeks, the calls kept coming. Dad, Mun, Ryan, even relatives I barely spoke to. Apparently, my father had launched a full-scale campaign. According to him, I was selfish, heartless, jealous. The aunt who was ruining a young man's future. It was unbelievable. People who had never contributed a single dollar to Emma's future suddenly felt entitled to decide what happened to her money. One evening, my Aunt Linda called. "Sweetheart, couldn't you at least lend Tyler some of it?" I laughed bitterly. "Are you offering your retirement savings first?" Silence. Then she quickly changed the subject. "Exactly. Everyone wanted me to sacrifice. Nobody wanted to sacrifice themselves." Meanwhile, Emma noticed everything. Kids always do. One Saturday, she walked into the kitchen while I was paying bills. "Mom?" "Yeah, honey." "Did I do something wrong?" The question hit me like a punch. I immediately set everything down. "Of course not." She looked at the floor. "Then why is everybody upset because of me?" My heart broke. Because this entire situation had never been about money anymore. It was about making an 11-year-old girl feel guilty for existing. I pulled her into a hug. "Listen to me." She looked up. "You have absolutely nothing to apologize for. Nothing." "But Grandpa?" "No," I interrupted gently. "This isn't your fault." She nodded, but I could see the hurt lingering behind her eyes. And that's when I made a promise, not out loud, to myself. I would never allow anyone to make my daughter feel small, so someone else could feel important. Never. Months passed. The family tension became permanent. Holiday invitations stopped arriving. Birthday parties happened without us. Group photos appeared on social media that made it obvious we had been excluded. At first it hurt. Then it didn't. Because something surprising happened. Life got better. Without constant family drama, Emma and I grew closer than ever. We created our own traditions. Movie nights, road trips, Sunday breakfasts. We stopped chasing approval from people who clearly didn't value us. For the first time in years, there was peace. Then Tyler started Yale, and almost immediately, cracks began to appear. The perfect story my family had built around him wasn't matching reality. I heard rumors through relatives. Academic struggles, partying, missed classes, credit card debt. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to raise questions. Questions nobody wanted to ask because Tyler wasn't supposed to fail. He was the golden child, the chosen one, the investment everyone had bet on. The pressure must have been enormous. But instead of facing reality, my family doubled down. Every problem became someone else's fault. Professors were unfair. The university was too demanding. The economy was difficult. Excuses piled up year after year. Meanwhile, Emma thrived. She worked hard in school, won scholarships, joined academic programs, volunteered in the community, never complained, never demanded attention. She simply kept moving forward. And every time she achieved something, I felt proud beyond words. Not because she was proving my family wrong, because she was proving herself right. Then came the day that changed everything. Emma was 18. I was 40, and she had just received acceptance letters from several outstanding universities. The smile on her face reminded me of that little girl holding a school certificate at Grandpa's table years earlier. Only now she understood exactly how hard she'd worked to get there. That evening we celebrated with pizza in our living room. Nothing fancy, just us. The way we liked it. Halfway through dinner my phone buzzed. A message from Ryan, the first direct message he'd sent me in almost 2 years. My stomach immediately tightened. Something felt wrong. I opened it. 3 sentences. That's all it took. 3 sentences that made my jaw drop. 3 sentences that revealed the shocking truth about Tyler, Yale, and where all that money had actually gone. And the moment I read them, I realized my father had sacrificed far more than a college fund 7 years ago. He had gambled away his entire family. And now the bill was finally coming due. I stared at Ryan's message for nearly a full minute before I could process what I was reading. The words didn't make sense at first. Then they made too much sense. Tyler never graduated. That was the first sentence. My heart skipped a beat. The second sentence hit even harder. He dropped out 3 years ago, and then came the third. Dad spent almost everything trying to hide it. I read the message again, and again, and again. 7 years! For 7 years, my family had acted as though Tyler was living some Ivy League success story. The brilliant grandson, the future star, the proof that all their sacrifices had been worth it. It was all a lie. I immediately called Ryan. He answered on the first ring. His voice sounded exhausted, older, defeated. Tell me this isn't true. There was a long silence. Then he sighed. It's true. The story spilled out over the next hour. Tyler had struggled during his second year at Yale. Instead of asking for help, he started skipping classes. Then came parties. Then academic probation. Then suspension. Finally, he left altogether. Only a handful of people knew. Dad refused to tell anyone. According to Ryan, Grandpa couldn't handle the embarrassment. He had spent years protecting the image he'd built around Tyler. The golden child couldn't fail. So the family created a fiction instead. Every holiday, every family gathering, every social media post, they pretended Tyler was still succeeding. Meanwhile, Dad emptied savings accounts, covered debts, paid credit cards, bailed Tyler out of financial disasters. Again, and again, and again. The more I listened, the more stunned I became. Not because Tyler failed. Life happens. People struggle. What shocked me was the cover-up, the obsession with appearances, the desperate need to prove they had been right all along. Dad lost a lot of money, Ryan admitted quietly. How much? Another pause. Then he gave me a number. I nearly dropped the phone. It was more than 4 times the amount Dad had demanded from Emma's college fund. 4 times. The irony was unbelievable. 7 years earlier, $47,000 supposedly would have saved the family's future. Instead, hundreds of thousands disappeared trying to maintain a lie. A few weeks later, I learned the situation was even worse. Dad's health had declined. Medical expenses were growing. Retirement savings were nearly gone. And suddenly, the same family members who once called me selfish were looking for help. Then came the phone call. The one I had secretly expected. Dad called me personally. For the first time in years, his voice sounded weaker than I remembered. Older. Smaller. After a few minutes of awkward conversation, he finally got to the point. We need to talk. I already knew where this was going. So I simply said, okay. A week later, I sat across from him at the same dining room table where everything had started. The same house, the same chairs, the same room. But the power dynamic had completely changed. Dad looked tired. The confidence he once carried so easily was gone. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then, he cleared his throat. I made mistakes. I waited. He looked down. I thought I was helping Tyler. I still said nothing. I wanted the best for him. There it was. The same justification, different words, same excuse. Finally, I spoke. And what about Emma? His eyes closed. Just for a second. But I noticed, because deep down he knew. For years he had chosen one grandchild over another. For years he had treated Emma's future like it mattered less. For years he had expected her to sacrifice for someone else. And now reality had caught up with him. I was wrong, he whispered. It was the first genuine apology I'd ever heard from him regarding that situation. And, strangely enough, hearing it didn't feel as satisfying as I'd imagined. Because apologies don't erase years of damage. They don't erase tears. They don't erase memories. They don't erase the moment an 11-year-old girl asked if her grandfather loved someone else more. Some wounds remain. Dad looked at me. We could use some help. There it was. The request, not for Tyler this time, for himself. The room became very quiet. 7 years earlier, everyone expected me to sacrifice my daughter's future. Now they needed something from me again. I thought about Emma, about every overtime shift, every sacrifice, every difficult choice. Then I smiled gently. Dad, do you remember what you told me after my divorce? His expression changed immediately. Because he remembered. I could see it. You told me nobody was coming to save me. He lowered his eyes. I continued. You told me I needed to stand on my own feet. Silence. You told me hardship builds character. The irony hung in the air between us, painfully obvious. Dad looked ashamed. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then I remembered Emma sitting quietly at that table 7 years earlier. I remembered her heartbreak. I remembered the pressure, the manipulation, the guilt. And I realized something important. Revenge wasn't about making him suffer. Life had already handled that. The real victory was what happened next. I didn't give him money, but I didn't humiliate him either. I simply told him the truth. My responsibility is my daughter. Then I stood up and left. A month later, Emma started college. Not with borrowed money, not with debt, not with someone else's sacrifice. With the fund that had always belonged to her, combined with scholarships she'd earned herself. The day I helped her move into her dorm, she hugged me tightly. I couldn't have done this without you. I smiled. Actually, you did, because she had. She earned every opportunity, every achievement, every success. As I watched her walk toward her future, I realized something beautiful. The story had never been about $47,000. It wasn't even about Yale. It was about a choice. 7 years earlier, everyone expected me to protect a fantasy. Instead, I protected my daughter. And in the end, that decision changed everything. Tyler got the future everyone tried to buy for him. Emma built the future she earned. One collapsed, the other flourished. And if I had to make the same choice all over again, I'd choose my daughter every single time.